Well, thanks, everybody. I'm going to start by introducing Justin Wheating, President and CEO of NRG Systems. Justin.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm Justin Wheating. I'm the President and CEO of NRG Systems. We're thrilled to be a diamond sponsor of this event. We're one of those disruptive companies that Joe Fusco referred to last night, based in Heinsberg, and we're responsible for providing the information that has resulted in 2/3 of the wind farms around the world that are operating now. It's my privilege to introduce Dan Reicher to you, to talk about the new climate economy. When I asked Dan where he was based, he said United Airlines, and you'll understand why in a moment. Dan is the executive director of the Steyer-Taylor Center for the Energy Policy and Finance at Stanford University, a joint center of the Stanford Graduate School of Business and Stanford Law School, where he holds faculty positions. He came to Stanford in 2011 from Google, where he served since 2007 as the Director of Climate Change and Energy Initiatives. He has more than 25 years of experience in energy and environmental policy, finance, and technology. He's served 3 presidents in the Clinton administration as Assistant Secretary of Energy for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and the Department of Energy Chief of Staff, as a member of Obama's transition team and co-chair of the Energy and Environmental team for President Obama, and as a staff member of President Carter's Commission on the Accident at 3 Mile Island. He's a member of the Secretary of Energy Advisory Board, the National Academy of Sciences Board on Energy and Environmental Systems, a senior fellow of the Brookings Institution, and board chair and interim president and CEO of the American Council on Renewable Energy. He also serves on the boards of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy and American Rivers, the Vermont Law School Environmental Advisory Committee, and is an advisor to the Renewable Funding LLC, Slayton, and the Spark Fund. And I think he must be very highly ranked at United Airlines. He also is an avid kayaker. He's been down the Rio Grande River and the Yangtze River, so he's obviously both practically and metaphorically understands how to handle turbulent waters. Dan Reicher.
Thank you, Justin. And as you can see, as my wife says, it's hard for me to keep a job. I am very pleased to be here. It's great to be back in Vermont. I've spent many years here at Northern Power, a company called New Energy Capital. And I've got to move fast, and I was told I've got to cut the length of this, so I'm going to talk fast. You're going to see a lot of slides. But first, I want to thank some people in the room. I can't thank everyone, but my longest-standing friend in Vermont, I think Chuck Ross, my neighbors and friends in Warren, Vermont, Laura Arneson, Bill McClay, Beth Binns, and Candace White, and the new president and dean of Vermont Law School, Tom McHenry. Tom, raise your hand. This is a guy you should get to know. An eminent environmental and energy lawyer, has done an awful lot, and he's going to really do great things at Vermont Law School. So, with that, let's dive in. If this works. IT. All right. Next slide, please. Paul, don't count this against me on my time. We almost got it. Nope. I could tell you a story about kayaking on the Yangtze. All right. The future is not what it used to be. This is my favorite expression of all. And we only need look at the last couple of weeks. This is Harvey. This is Harvey. And this is why we're facing what we're facing. This is, in fact, our carbon footprint. I've always wondered why the U.S. is put as the heel in this carbon footprint, but that's another story. So, you know, the big international energy agencies, the big one that I spend a lot of time with is the International Energy Agency, and in a kind of subtle way, they talk about, in a sense, the biggest environmental risk of the 21st century, which is, in fact, as you all know, climate change. But they also talk about the greatest economic opportunity of the 21st century, which is global investment in clean energy. Global investment in energy, I should say. We're going to make a lot of choices between clean and not so clean over the next 2 or 3 decades, but it's literally measured in trillions, not in billions. So, how are we going to get there? This is not the answer. These are some colleagues at Stanford. You can see the formula. Then a miracle occurs. That's not going to be it, nor is this going to be it. Only the New York Times can find the intersection between climate change and gun control. Anyway, the best way to predict the future, my other favorite phrase, is to invent it. And this is the way I think about the whole area, a triangle of technology, policy, and finance. There's a rumor going around at Stanford that I have this tattooed on my back. I will not substantiate that one way or the other. But we really got to work at all 3 points of this triangle. We've got to advance the technologies. We've got to put smart policies in place. And we need lots and lots and lots of capital. Got to get students trained in each of these areas. And we've got to integrate across them. That's one of our big problems. Technologists can't talk to policy people who can't talk to finance people. So, quick run through technology. We need it all. We need it all. Yes, renewables, yes, efficiency, but there's going to be a lot of other pieces of this if we're really going to get to where we need to get in terms of carbon emissions or reductions. I'm going to talk about a couple of those. CCS is carbon capture and storage. But we got to start here. I love renewables. I'm heavily involved in renewables, but we've got to start with efficiency first. I think Amory had it best early on. All people want is cold beer and hot showers. We want the services. If we can do it with less, all the better. My favorite story is the lowly refrigerator, 2,000 kilowatt hours a year. In the 70s, we're down to 400. The Department of Energy has set those efficiency standards through the years. I had the great pleasure of announcing the efficiency standard for 2001. Efficiency of refrigerators is not a scintillating topic. The folks at DOE said to me, how are we going to put some sizzle on this? President Clinton had just made his final State of the Union address. Its focus was building a bridge to the 21st century, going from 99 into 2000. We said the following: we're building a fridge to the 21st century. It was my greatest day as a bureaucrat. It was the quote of the week in Newsweek. On we go. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. A very important concept. This is where energy technology meets information technology. This is where a lot of the opportunities in efficiency lies. At Google, we started something called Google Power Meter. Knowledge is less power is what we said. This was a little simple device on your kitchen counter that in real time would tell you what was going on in your home. We had some traction. Google shut it down for various reasons. That was frustrating to me. But on we went. A very nice race that has broken out over the last few years. And of course, Google did go on to buy Nest at $3 billion. I said to several reporters we could have saved $2.9 billion had we gone on with Google Power Meter, but that's another story for another day. All right. This is the big one, though. This is fuel economy. This is the one number people know, which is how much gas costs. I should also say, as some of you know, I delivered our third child in the front seat of a car on a cold day in April in Waterbury, Vermont. It was not as a Shell station, and his nickname is, in fact, Car Son. On we go. Here's the important thing about fuel economy. We'll come back to this when we talk about policy. We were flatlined on fuel economy at 27.5 miles per gallon for a long time. President Obama struck a deal with Detroit, and we've been working our way up that curve towards 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. This is not how we're going to do it. As much as I like solar, this is how we're going to do it. Not only the Volt, a hybrid gas electric, but now the Bolt. And of course, everybody's favorite car in California, the Tesla. At Google, we did some work on how these automobiles could talk to the grid, electricity coming from the grid to the car, electricity going from the car back to the grid. That was a while ago. For a while, we talked about tomorrow's smart grid. Now we need to talk about today's smart grid, as you'll hear soon from Mary Powell. There's so much we can do today with this kind of technology, where renewables meets the grid, meets plug-in vehicles, and everything else. All right. These were pretty amazing numbers in 2015. Look at what got put on the grid new globally. Huge numbers of renewables. That was 2012, 250,000 megawatts of wind. We're now at 400,000 megawatts of wind globally. That was solar in 2012, 100,000 megawatts. I think we just hit 300,000 megawatts globally. Huge, huge growth. But it all got started here. My favorite story that never gets told, the first megawatt scale wind turbine in the world was built on Grandpa's Knob in Vermont 75 years ago at 6:56 p.m. on October 19th, 1941. First time in the world a large wind turbine was connected to a utility scale grid, and Vermont can rightly claim that the renewable energy industry, the modern renewable energy industry, was born here. Now we're going to see, this is a very exciting development, and not just the ones that sit on the bottom, 10,000 megawatts in Europe, but we're really going to see with the floating systems. The offshore wind resource in this country is vast. The offshore wind resource globally is far bigger, particularly around the Pacific Rim. That's where the big winds are. You want to see dark colors. The darker the colors, the purples, the reds, that is where the best wind resource is. But look at this. This is if we go offshore. If you get into deeper water, this is where the real big wind resource is. The Great Lakes is second only to California in terms of the offshore wind resource at 60 meters or greater, and those are only exceeded by Hawaii. So why do I tell you all this? That's because the arrival of these floating systems is a big, big deal. We now have turbines going in the water that can float, large turbines with sophisticated sensors and software that talk to the blade, so when the turbine starts to tip, one blade says to the other, I'm going to back off, you put your face into the wind, and you can keep these things running at almost verticality in a 50, 60, 70 mile an hour wind. This is an amazing technology. The turbines going in the water are 8 megawatts, very large. All right, 2 minutes, here we go. This is from Statoil, the big Norwegian oil company. It's done more with floating oil platforms in the world, and this is what they've invented. I want to take 2 minutes to show you this. A lot of hokey music. And a lot of hokey words, but you'll get to the good part in a second. This is a large Siemens turbine on a floating rig off the coast of Norway in about 600 feet of water. 3 ship's anchors hold it down. There's a power cable that comes out of the bottom and goes to shore. That's the floating foundation that goes underwater. All right. The industry has gone well beyond this. The first project using full-scale platforms is being built as we speak off the coast of Scotland. It'll be done this year. 8-megawatt turbines, as I said. Lots of companies have gotten into this race. I'm part of a different one. And I think this is really where a big chunk of the wind industry is going to head. Prices are coming down dramatically because that's always the big question. What do these things cost? So, wind. Don't forget our biggest renewable energy resource, which of course globally is hydropower. It does have its challenges, but it's a big resource. It's been in use in New England, it's been in use in Vermont for a long time, and there's some real innovation going on. For example, the ability to do what's called pump storage, new approaches to that, turbines that can run both directions, a whole host of things that are very important. Geothermal, not a big thing around here except for ground source heat pumps, but out in the west, massive heat resource, not just pulling up steam and hot water from deep in the earth, but now being able to go into hot, dry rock and use that resource as well. And bioenergy, you've got the McNeil generating station here. You know, there's a lot of potential there. It's a big resource in other parts of the world. All right, transmission. This is really a key to all of this. Unless we build a lot of transmission, we're not going to get to where we need to get. Transmission is the key to pulling resources out of Arizona to California, out of Oklahoma to the west, from Wyoming to Phoenix, but we have a hard time building transmission in this country. There's a whole host of reasons, but this is the main one. It's siting. It is not technology. We have the technology we need, but we need better planning, we need better cost allocation, and this siting issue really needs to be figured out if we're really going to do this. Texas, the biggest wind generating state in the country, was able to build 3,000 miles of transmission line, $7 billion worth of investment. They figured it out. We ought to be able to in the rest of the country. Storage, absolutely essential in California. We are now generating too much at certain times of the spring and fall, too much solar, too much wind, not enough demand. We need to deal with storage. We have something called the duck curve. The sun goes down, and all of a sudden, we've got to ramp up thousands of megawatts of natural gas-fired generation to make up for the difference. They have a different issue in Denmark. There can be days in the windiest month of the year, December, where the wind doesn't blow. So not just hours that have to be addressed, but days. And then, of course, as you know, in a place like Vermont or here in a place like England, the difference between summer solar and winter solar is dramatic, so we even need to begin talking about seasonal storage. There's lots of storage technologies out there. They are not just batteries. Batteries is what people focus on here in Vermont with respect to solar, but we're going to have to get to bulk storage as well. This is a big, big need across hours, days, and months. All right, carbon capture and storage, CCS. Probably don't hear a lot about it here, but all of the international organizations tell us we're really going to have to make this work if we're going to move forward, if we're really going to get to that deep decarbonization that we all talk about. Projects already operating on coal, on ethanol, at fertilizer plants, at oil refineries. We pull the CO2 out of these systems, and then we go and do something with it. What's left of the big carbon emitters in California these days are not power plants as much as they are things like cement plants, asphalt production plants, natural gas generating systems. Those are the big emitters on an individual basis, Those are something we've got to address, and the best thing we can do these days is to figure out for these big industrial emitters how to make carbon capture work. Technology is proceeding. There's now a way to capture carbon dioxide from natural gas power plants. A facility has been built in Texas to do that. A commercial scale one is going to be built starting next year. What do you do with the CO2? Now you can either pump it deep underground into saline aquifers, or you can pump it into old oil wells. What could we do in the future? Put the CO2 into cement. Begin to make fuels out of it. And then a whole host of things. If we could capture the CO2 from biomass power plants, we could actually turn those biomass power plants into carbon negative, not just carbon neutral facilities. A long way to go with CCS, but something we got to make work. All right, policy. Policy matters. When the wind production tax credit is in place, it has big effect. When it is no longer in effect, as it has been on several occasions, development drops tremendously. The biggest policy step we've taken globally, and of course, the not-so-new factor these days. The Paris Agreement is on the skids at this point. We've got to figure out how to address that problem. We may walk back from it as a country. I think we'll see. But I want to emphasize something, and I do disagree with Jigger on this point. I do think these federal programs, these federal regulatory programs are extremely important. The Clean Power Plan is, in fact, under assault right now. We could see it taken off the books. I mentioned the CAFE standards. Big issue with this. Are we going to stick with 54.5 miles per gallon, or, as EPA is suggesting, are we going to ratchet that back rather substantially? Those efficiency standards I mentioned with respect to refrigerators and 50 other products. The new DOE has not issued a single standard since it came into office. Will it issue any? These are big, big federal issues that we've got to address. The renewable energy credits are ratcheting down. The good news are, in fact, the states. We've come a long way when it comes to renewable portfolio standards. Vermont is no longer a hatch line. You've now got a mandatory RPS. Will California come to the rescue? That's one of the big questions. 50% RPS moving to 100%. California and other nations are signing climate agreements as we speak. California has independent authority to set automobile fuel economy standards. It has independent authority to set energy efficiency standards. So even as Washington goes backwards, we've got some authority in California to continue at least some of this going, but I really want to emphasize the federal stuff really, really, really does matter. Finally, finance, and I'm going to talk more about finance this afternoon at one of the breakout sessions. This is what the International Energy Agency says we're spending today on clean energy globally, $746 billion across all of these energy sources that we've talked about. The IEA says we got to get to 2.3 billion, 2.3 trillion, not billion. We've got to get there very fast. We've got to triple our spending if we're going to have any shot at staying within 2 degrees C. We think we've got a lot of money, $100 trillion across all these institutional investors, but when you actually go and look at what the annual investable capital is, what do you got every year? It's a lot closer to 3 trillion. You got to set that next to that 2.3 trillion. We're going to have to take up a big chunk of that available investable capital on an annual basis, and we're going to have to do it fast. This is a huge, huge challenge. We got lots of things standing in the way, lots and lots of investment risks that are the real issue that we've got to face if we're going to go from the investment level we've got today to that $2.3 trillion investable level. We're going to talk about these in the session this afternoon. The green bar is a really great deal. The red is what you want to avoid. As these risks compound, look at the end. Red gets bigger than green. Each of the risks that you layer onto a deal, as you layer onto a renewable energy or other kind of projects, this is what happens. And we got to get to this in a very big way. Finally, I'll finish where I began, which is energy efficiency. 3% of existing commercial space is renovated each year, but only about a tenth include state-of-the-art efficiency. It's even lower in the residential sector. Lots of risks get in the way. And Deutsche Bank said this: it's a $300 billion investment opportunity, $1 trillion in energy savings, and we could cut climate emissions by 10% if we could get at these risks that investment in energy efficiency, our cheapest resource, brings with it. So, future is not what it used to be. Best way to predict the future is to invent it. Thank you very much.